At the start, I just want to say thank you to Liz, who initiated this event, this protest. I want to say thank you to Foyefai, to Amy, to Vincent, to all volunteers, to Karina, to Isadora, to Kelly and Tessely, to Sinfu, Malta, to Sarita, to Yun, to Koen and Rochelle for so graciously and vulnerably sharing their stories and their art. And thank you to all of you who are still here in the rain. I mean, I would really like to be home right now. There are so many places that I could think of that are far better than this one. But racism doesn't stop. There is no off switch to racism for me. And so I have to be here. I am adopted. I grew up in a family, in a white family, where it was normal for family members to make jokes about my eyes, chink, slit eye, split oog, and to make jokes about my appearance. I grew up internalizing all these jokes, all these microaggressions, and I started believing them. And for most of my life, I thought that I was ugly. For most of my life, I thought that my existence comes with an asterisk. For most of my life, I thought that I have to apologize for living. This is what racism will do, as Rochelle described. So many people internalize it, and I am an example of someone who internalized it. It is dehumanizing when at work, a senior vice president walks in and asks who is in charge, and I tell him I am in charge, and he looks at me and then walks past me straight to the first white man in the room. It is demoralizing when you're the only person of color in the train and the police wants to see your passport, your ID, and turns your bag upside down, inside out. It is painful to be told you are attractive for an Asian. It is painful and traumatizing to hear insult after insult after insult everywhere you go your entire life. It is devastating when your own family members gaslight you and tone police you for speaking up, and an uncle wonders whether you have been radicalized because you start talking about racism. For most of my life, I kept quiet, because I believe that's the way to go. If I just stay quiet, if I just stay unassuming, racism won't find me. And that's how I went about my life, taking hit after hit, punch in the gut after punch in the gut, my self-esteem dying, my self-image taking blow after blow. But in 2010, one thing changed. In 2010, I traveled to South Korea, my birth country, for the first time after adoption. And I traveled for 1 month, and it hit me. For the first time in my life, I experienced 1 month of being respected, being left alone, not having to deal with racism and microaggressions. I was treated like a human being with decency. And it hit me that up until 2010, I have not experienced a single month in my life here in the Netherlands where I was left alone, where I was just being treated like a decent human being. And it hit me. This should be the norm. I should be able to live my life like this, being respected for who I am, being treated like a decent human being. But I never had that. And so I came back from that trip and I realized something's got to change. And that one thing that has to change first is me. I have to start deconstructing all the internalized racism and hatred that I have developed And I have to start speaking up, speaking out. I have to start confronting the racism that I experience every day. And my God, it was tough. As said, I had to cut ties with a cousin who kept gaslighting and tone policing me. An uncle has cut ties with me because he believes I'm radicalized. And all I am doing is sharing my story. To the media that has been present today, I thank you. But I have questions. Where were you 2 weeks ago? Where the fuck were you 1 year ago when Asian people in the Netherlands were hurting? You, media, are guilty of erasing us from the public view. And erasure is dehumanizing. And dehumanization leads to desensitization. And desensitization is the reason why so many people cannot empathize with people like me. So I thank you for being here, but I have questions. And my question is, how will you make up for the wrongs that you have done in the past decades? How will you make sure that Asian people are allowed to tell our stories on your platforms structurally? I see many white people in the audience and I thank you. I thank you. But I also see many white people not present, and your your non-presence here speaks loudly. I saw your black squares, I saw your hashtags, but it means nothing if your anti-racism fight is selective. Selective anti-racism is still upholding racism. If your anti-racism fight does not include East Asians, Southeast Asians, South Asians, Southwest Asians, Central Asians, all Asians, it is not anti-racism. So I have questions for you white people. What are you going to do to make sure that we are no longer erased? What are you going to do to make sure that your anti-racism fight, that our anti-racism fight is inclusive? And to my fellow Asians, some of you are probably hurting right now. Some of you are grieving over what has happened. Some of you are still processing the attacks. And that's okay. You may find strength and energy from being here, but you may well be in pain. There is a time for grief. There's a time for hurting. There is a time for feeling defeated. There's a time for that. But we cannot let white supremacy make us feel disillusioned. We cannot let racism make us give up, because if we do that, white supremacy wins. If we do that, racism wins. And we can never, ever let white supremacy and racism win. So grieve, hurt, be in pain, process, and then when tomorrow comes, turn your anger into art. Turn your frustration into a battle cry. Turn your disappointment into a plea for help. And turn to one another. And as we go forward, let's make sure that our fight is intersectional, that our fight is inclusive, but let's make sure that our voices are no longer silenced. Last week, I got a phone call from my mother. The one person probably in my life that I have fought the most with, to be honest. And I can also say, I haven't always been fair in those fights. But last week she called me and she said, Kevin, I'd like for us to have a conversation about how it was for you growing up in the Netherlands, growing up adopted, growing up being a person of color. I don't understand everything, but I'd like to understand this. This has been a conversation that's been waiting to happen for 35 years. And I don't know how the conversation is going to be, but I find hope in the fact that my mother, who's in her late 60s, can change, can be open-minded, is willing to listen to my pain and not judge it. Because I have to find hope in this. Because if not, I will give up. And if not, I will turn bitter. And if not, I will become disillusioned. And I hope that you find hope in being here today. And I hope that you find hope in whatever small glimmer, whatever small success. Because if my mother can change at her age, damn sure the Netherlands should be able to change. And damn sure my friends and your colleagues should be able to change. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for standing in solidarity. And let's make sure we stop Asian hate.